Where were the Alabama Crimson Tide when Kirk Herbstreit needed them most?
You are Locked On ACC, your daily podcast on the Atlantic Coast Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Are we still down with this idea of wanting to use hypothetical wins to decide the playoff field? Shout out to the everydayers. Happy almost New Year. Or maybe it's already New Year, depending on when you're watching and listening to this. Thank you so much for making Locked On ACC your first listen and your first watch today. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts. We're free on YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On this episode, we will talk about a report of alleged tampering for Texas quarterback Quinn Ewers, who is still at Texas for now, and he's still in the college football playoff. But there's a lot of rumors about his future, and apparently, allegedly, teams really want to entice him to get into that transfer portal. The University of Miami has fired their defensive coordinator, which I feel needed to be done. The ACC finally won another bowl game. It was dicey. Louisville survived a comeback win, a comeback bid by the Washington Huskies. But Kenton, the folks who just thought, Alabama should have been in the playoff, SMU didn't belong in there, Indiana didn't belong in there, the SEC and their hypothetical wins, they all belonged in the college football playoff. So surely Alabama was going to dominate and beat up on Michigan today, right? Not so much. Jalen Milroe throws an interception, loses 2 fumbles in the game. Michigan defeats the Crimson Tide 19-13. A Michigan team that had a 7-5 regular season and lost to Indiana, who did get into the playoffs, even though Kirk Herbstreit thought they shouldn't have been in, that you're leaving out these teams that belong to be in the field. So you're telling me Alabama belonged to be in that playoff? Losing to a depleted Michigan squad today would tell you otherwise.
Donno, that's so interesting. You're dropping so many interesting facts. Let me add some facts on there for you. Did you know that Michigan had 4 players that were projected to go within the first 40-ish picks of the NFL draft sitting out as well?
Yes.
That Ryan Williams kid, did he play today? Was he available? I didn't see him much. Everybody said if Will Johnson ain't playing, he's gonna go nuts. Will Johnson was, in fact, in street clothes. He was in street clothes. He was sitting out there dressed like you and me, Donno. Just instead of wearing Canes gear, he instead of the U, he wore the M, and they did just fine. They did just fine. I'm shocked. I'm shocked. And Grandma, I'm sorry. I told you I was going to stop talking about your Todd. Her birthday is coming up, so we love you, Granny.
Grandma, I feel so bad for Grandma.
See, listen. It was already awkward at Christmas when she said, "You've been talking about my Todd." I said, "Grandma, I got to shoot it straight, okay?" And why are we talking about Michigan and Bama on this show? Because Donno and I have told people all year long, this has been propaganda that propped up some conferences and defeated others. Because now the narrative that is being swung is, bowl games are like glorified Pro Bowls. Yeah. Now that all of a sudden, now that Bama's lost, now that South Carolina's trailing Illinois, now all of a sudden the narrative is, it's too many opt-outs. These games don't matter. But mind you, these are the same bowl games that have people saying the ACC is a second-rate Power 5 or Power 4 conference. Now listen, I'm okay with people out of both camps. I'm okay with people who say these are glorified Pro Bowl games. These are exhibition games in which most of your team is going to be out if you have a really good team. I'm okay with those people who say bowl games are meaningless. I'm also okay with the people who say bowl games and your record in bowl games as a conference say a lot about you. I'm okay with that. The only people I'm not okay with are the people that decide and pick and choose which one to pick their narrative.
You got to pick a lane and stay in the lane.
It got to be Uchiwali. It got to be one mic. It can't be both. You can't combine those 2 songs, okay? We all love some Nas. You can't combine both songs. So I look at this situation, and again, Donno and I are talking about this because this was a huge national story. It was SMU didn't belong in. It was Indiana didn't belong in. It was all these teams didn't belong in. But now the teams that y'all had as the last one or the first one out, they just got dog walked by a team that couldn't complete a forward pass.
Right.
They got dog walked by a team that everybody's begging a guy that technically is not even on the roster yet. can we please play Bryce Underwood just for one game? Let's just see what he's got. Because it can't be worse than Davis Warren. Orangey's already in the portal. So, I look at this and I say to myself, very simply, this is why you play the game. And one last thing on this, and I'm going to kick it back to you, Donno.
Sure.
In 3 of Alabama's losses, and every loss that they took except for Tennessee, not only were they favored by at least 2 touchdowns in all of them. This was the smallest margin that they were favored by. I believe this one was 14. I believe it was 16.5 against Oklahoma, and I believe it was 19 or 20 or so against Vandy. Again, I don't ever want to hear if these 2 teams played, who would be favored. Yeah. How much does it matter? How much does it matter? Because in those 3 games, Vegas believed that there would be a point spread total of plus 40 Alabama. Alabama is 0-3 in those games with a negative 30-something going against them? Interesting how that works.
Yeah, and like you said, like the reason why we're talking about this on Locked On ACC is the ripple effect is very much felt by the Atlantic Coast Conference because Absolutely. They're, talking heads like Kirk Herbstreit are advocating for teams in the ACC and I'm sure in the Big 12 and even to some extent the Big 10 because even though Herbie ironically is a Big 10 guy having played at Ohio State, he has become a mouthpiece for the SEC. So they're basically lobbying to take at-large bids away from the other conferences and give them out to SEC teams with 3 losses. Who knows? Next year it might be 4-loss SEC teams that they're lobbying for. And so that very much has an effect on the ACC because a week ago, Kirk Herbstreit actually said it out loud, and the Sports Center host agreed with him, thought he made a very good point when he said, we can't get caught up in wins. It's not about your wins, it's about who you beat. Well, who you lose to, Herbie, should also matter. Maybe there should have been a warning sign about Alabama when they got beaten 24-3 by Oklahoma, a bad football team that was only bowl eligible because they beat Alabama. Maybe that should have been a warning sign about Alabama's offense, which looked like hot garbage today against Michigan, by the way. You could prop up their history, their program prestige. Nick Saban isn't walking through that door anymore, by the way. And suddenly Kalen DeBoer without Michael Penix doesn't look like the genius he looked like last year. But they should get in on reputation alone. And I'm even wondering, Kenton, if these media hoax are going to, or hacks, I think is the word I was looking for. I don't know if hoke is a word. Hokey is a word. Hoke is not. These media hacks, I'm wondering if they're going to change their tune and soften their stance, but I don't think they will. I just think they're going to change the narrative, and they're not going to change their opinions because at the end of the day, they make up their minds before the season even starts, who the 12 best teams are, i.e. who the biggest brands are, who might put up the best TV ratings for ESPN, and no amount of losing will change their minds on that.
And that's why y'all come to Locked On ACC. That's why. Because remember when Pitt was undefeated and rolling, and I was on the Pitt train heavy. I took my lashings on the squad during their losing streak, and I admitted, hey, I was wrong. I see new information. Pitt is not a good team. I could admit that. I could admit I was wrong down the stretch. I admitted that. I admitted, hey, SMU is looking like one of the better teams of the conference, despite the fact that you and I both came in thinking, oh, they could get a couple upsets when they showed themselves to be consistent, when they proved themselves to be a consistent team at stopping the run, when they showed themselves to be a team that could do more than just hold up, but win battles in the trenches. I said, hey, you've got to reevaluate this team, despite what I believed about them to begin with, because that is what this thing is about. It's not about, to me, this whole what we're doing with analyzing who's good, who's not, it's more of a scientific method than a confirming of our bias. We don't end with the conclusion and then work back and make everything else justify that. We have a hypothesis that, hey, this team will beat this team because, or they should beat this team because. And if the results come back different, we say, okay, well, this is why the results came back different than we thought. And one of those this is whys could just be we're wrong. But now I'm already seeing it. While South Carolina was losing to Illinois, which they were at the time where we started this recording, but I believe they scored a touchdown to take the lead. At that point in time, people were screaming, well, USC and Alabama have a lot of opt-outs, and Illinois and
Right.
Michigan don't. And, this is just these are glorified scrimmages for these teams who feel like they should have got in, so they're let down and they got less to play for. No, forget all that. Show up and win the damn game. Yeah. I understand. And I'm a last thing because I know we got to get the break here. But, Donno, I feel the worst for USC, Alabama, and Ole Miss. You know why, Donno?
Why?
Every other team during bowl season only has to play one game. Those teams have to play 45 hypothetical games apiece. And then they got to play a real game. So my heart goes out to them.
Yeah, they're really tired by beating all the other 44 opponents that they were simulated against.
Jalen Milroe's arm gave out after about the 25th hypothetical that Bama was supposed to win by 50. The 45th time that they played Indiana, his arm was like, all right, I can't do this no more. So we can't really hold the real life results against them because, like Kirk Herbstreit said, we need to pay attention to more than wins and losses. We need to pay attention to more than their performance. What we're seeing before our eyes, Kirk Herbstreit like a cheap man. Who you gonna believe? Me and your lying-ass eyes. That's what I'm gonna ask you right now. Who you gonna believe?
Yeah. Well, I did see the ACC pick up their second bowl victory finally, and we fully admit the ACC has not represented well during bowl season. We had Syracuse to hang our hats on for a while. And now we got the Louisville Cardinals, and that was, man, talk about a thrilling finish against that was an awesome game and an awesome finish. Miami has fired their defensive coordinator. And by the way, Miami's already getting linked to interest in another current DC inside the ACC. So that's a relevant topic as well. You want to keep it locked right here. I'm Alex Donno from Locked On Canes. He is Kenton Gibbs from Locked On Wolfpack, and we're only getting started on this brand new episode of Locked On ACC. Guys, did Rocket Money help you find any subscriptions you forgot about or that you were paying for twice? That's happened to me. I had a few subscriptions I didn't even realize I was still paying for, and Rocket Money made it so easy to track them all down. It's like having a personal assistant for your finances. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps you find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. It brings everything together in one place, whether it's subscriptions, your spending habits, or even the goals you want to hit this year. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all of the app's premium features. For me, one of the best features is that subscription tracker. I've used it to cancel services I wasn't using anymore, and I've already saved a ton. Plus, with their goals feature, you'll be able to automatically set aside money for your future. No more stressing out about budgeting every month. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon. rocketmoney.com/lockedon. Thank you so much for making this episode of Locked On ACC your first listen and your first watch today. Make sure you make Locked On College Football with Spencer McLaughlin your next listen. He's been very, very busy with this transfer portal season, bowl season, CFP. So make sure to give Spencer and Locked On College Football a listen and a watch. Much like this show, it's available free wherever you get your podcasts and available free on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So, Kenton, I was hoping the ACC would get another bowl dub today, and boy, did this one come down to the wire. So Louisville had a 2-touchdown fourth quarter lead, and Jed Fish, coach of Washington, sounded a little cocky after the third quarter, talking about, hey, we're down 2 scores, we're going to get 4 or 5 possessions in this fourth quarter, no problem. So Washington only had 2 possessions in the fourth quarter, but they made the most of them, Kenton, because they turned their 14-point deficit into a 1-point deficit. And I've got to send a shout out to Washington's young quarterback, because both quarterback starters were out for this game. So there was no Tyler Shuck for Louisville. You had Harrison Bailey starting, and he played all right. But the real headliner was Damon Williams Jr., the young quarterback for Washington, who went 26 for 32, 374 yards, 4 touchdowns, and interception. He was also their leading rusher with 48 yards and a touchdown. So Williams absolutely balled out for Washington. And so when Louisville, they're up 7, Kenton, in the final couple minutes of the game, and Washington basically had 8 downs inside the 5-yard line, because you had a drive extended by what I thought was a bogus pass interference call against Louisville that started the downs over, 1st and goal, basically a goal line stand. And it comes all the way down to 4th down. Washington scores a touchdown to pull within 1. And Jedd Fisch, tell me how you feel about this just now. Maybe you could say, hey, it's a bowl game. It's not the most important thing in the world. But Jedd Fisch said, no overtime. We're either going to win this or we're going to lose this on a 2-point conversion, which Williams, who was Superman for most of the game, could not hit. He threw a little bit low. The pass was tipped. Louisville survives. They win by 1 point on a failed 2-point conversion. My heart was in my throat at the end of that game, Kenton. It was an awesome finish.
I sat there saying, not again to the ACC, not again, not again. The 2-touchdown lead evaporated like that. It literally, like, you blinked and you were like, wait a minute, I thought this game was put away. I thought Louisville had this thing put away. But I will say, on the Louisville side, right? Because, yes, Washington's quarterback played spectacular. He did his thing. He balled out. Yeah. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. But when I look at this game from Louisville side, we gave Clemson a lot of love, and we talked about their setup for the future. In terms of who I think is the second best setup for the future, let me just read something off for you. I've already told you about how bad of a man Isaac Brown is, and all that he can do on the ground.
And he was a true freshman this year, Isaac Brown.
But they've got another guy over there, Duke Watson. 10 carries, 83 yards, some tough running, some physical running. Duke Watson showed up in a major, major way in this game. And I'll tell you what, when you think about, the explosive run that he had, you say, oh, well, other than that 50-yarder, he didn't do much. Let's do the math on that, right? You're still looking at 7 rushes for about 30-something, even if you take away the 50-yard. The young man showed up in a major way. Yeah. So I look at this team and I say they got some stallions in that backfield. They got some guys that can absolutely get it done. And I appreciate the cerebral approach to how both of them run the ball. Both of them, they take their time. There's a patience. There's an understanding of how their blocks are getting set up, which this is crazy to think about, Donno. These are both freshmen. These are both guys they're mature beyond their years when reading blocks. And so to see that duo going forward, oh hell, man. ACC, y'all better put on y'all big boy pants when you're gonna take on the Cards, because I know that Brahms calling Cards as being the quarterback whisperer and reviving these quarterbacks who are nowhere men in the middle of nowhereville. He gets them and he makes them something special. But I'm gonna tell you, he's got to be the biggest fool on the scene if those two don't at least look at 10 to 15 touches per game apiece.
Yeah, I know. I'm with you on that wholeheartedly. So for a lot of teams in the ACC thrived with their offenses this year. Miami was one of those teams. Now, had Miami's defense actually showed up and not given up 30 or more points in 6 of the games that they played in this year, and not given up over 40 points in 3 of the games they played in this year, who knows? We might be talking college football playoff for Miami. And Mario Cristobal, he held the defensive coordinator accountable, and he made the decision, or at least made it official on Tuesday morning, that Lance Guidry has been fired. And first of all, is a really nice guy. I had a chance to cover Guidry for the past couple of years. Like, I wish him nothing but the best success. And I'm sorry that things didn't work out for him at the U, because I really wish that they'd had. But it wasn't as Cristobal said after the Pop-Tarts Bowl. Miami's defense this season did not meet the standard for Hurricanes football. So I think Guidry had to go, and it's too early to say for sure Kenton who Miami's going to bring in. I know that they're probably, from my understanding, going to look at some folks who have been former head coaches in college football. I've heard the name Pat Fitzgerald, who's the former Northwestern head coach. I've heard Mel Tucker, former Michigan State head coach. Both of them are actually currently involved in wrongful termination lawsuits, so there could be some legal red tape there. But then another name, Kenton, that's come out, that apparently Miami has contacted him, but so has Texas A&M. So he's going to have some folks vying for his services, is Tyler Santucci, the defensive coordinator from Georgia Tech, who did a phenomenal job this year. And Mario Cristobal knows how good of a DC Santucci is because they actually had the most success against Cam Ward and Miami's offense compared to any other team Miami played this year. Now, again, I don't think getting Santucci is going to be easy because, first of all, nobody knows for sure if he's leaving Georgia Tech. That's one. And second of all, Mike Elko is allegedly calling him from Texas A&M, and he and Elko have worked together before. There was a relationship, and Santucci has also worked at Texas A&M before, so there's a long-standing connection there. So if the Aggies, are serious about that, it might be hard for Miami to beat them out. But that's a name I've heard. You could potentially have a DC going from one ACC team to another.
I'm gonna tell you something. That Texas A&M bag is a little different. It's a little heavier than everybody else's bag. Even with all due respect to Miami, and Miami has not been known as exactly a penny pincher themselves, but there's certain schools that Notre Dame, Michigan, Texas A&M, Texas money a little different. It hits a little different. So I'm looking at this very closely because Santucci and that relationship with Elko could mean a lot there. But you're also asking yourself, if you are Santucci, do you want to stay in Elko's shadow potentially? Because you'll never get the credit for that. It's a lot like being a Andy Reid offensive coordinator. You'll never get the credit for what happens offensively if Andy Reid is your head coach. It's a very similar situation. And yes, people, I know Doug Peterson is from the Andy Reid tree, and he went on to win the Super Bowl. You don't get caught up on the little stuff. The entirety is, Elko is a defensive coach. People know him for that as a calling card. Yeah. If he does go to Miami, that would be a massive get. That would be a massive, massive get for Miami. I'll tell you this much. For Tucker and Fitzgerald, it's just a very clear thing that, you and I have talked about this a lot, and this is not a castigation on Miami, but you and I have talked about this before. Guidry being a nice guy doesn't mean jack squat if you can't win football games. Nope. You can't get a stop.
Nope.
We don't care. And this ain't a Miami thing. That's why I'm saying we.
Yeah.
All of us do not care if you have a weird case, if you have something bad in your history. Can you coach these boys up to get me some stops? That's what matters here. So
think about how many jobs Bobby Petrino has gotten since his little motorcycle incident.
Hello? and Bobby wasn't on that motorcycle alone. He wasn't on that motorcycle alone. So, there's very much so a thing. And again, this ain't about Miami. This is just an overall observation. It does not matter that they're tied up in legal red tape. If there is a way, if they find out, hey, we can legally hire them, everything is copacetic, their lawyers are handling that, they're not worried about it, they'll be just fine.
Yeah, no doubt. And Cristobal's got to get this hire right because he'll be looking for his third defensive coordinator in 4 seasons. And it's like, obviously you could say, hey, he hasn't gotten the right guys in the first place, which is fair. Right. But, just for the sake of continuity, I don't think keeping Guidry would have been the right move. I think he probably made the right move letting him go, but he's got to nail the replacement. There's no question about that. Now, Miami is probably one of the teams in the market for a transfer portal quarterback, especially after a poor showing by Emory Williams in the second half of the Pop-Tarts Bowl. They're certainly not the only team in the country going after big-name quarterbacks, not the only team in the conference going after big-name quarterbacks. There have been allegations of programs, unnamed programs, offering silly NIL money to Quinn Ewers of Texas. We'll talk a little bit about that when we come back. You want to keep it locked right here. We're not done yet on this brand new episode of Locked On ACC. Thank you so much for making Locked On ACC your first listen and your first watch today. Make sure you also check out our other shows. Kenton and Grayson do an awesome job on Locked On Wolfpack. I host Locked On Canes, so we had a big episode about the Lance Guidry firing early on today. Now, I don't know if this is necessarily a Miami-related or even ACC-related story, but this report from On3 Sports came out on Tuesday, Kenton, and of course on their thumbnail they had the word tampering in like huge capital letters with the allegation, and they don't name which program or programs are involved in this, but the allegation is that schools are offering big money to Texas quarterback Quinn Ewers, who's got a year of eligibility left. He may decide to go pro. He may not. Probably will decide to go pro, in my opinion. But the schools are offering him allegedly up to somebody offered him $6 million for a 1-year NIL deal. Now, I'll be, as someone with a little bit of knowledge of what the NIL markets look like for star quarterbacks, my immediate knee-jerk reaction was to call shenanigans on that. And listen, maybe I'm not saying it's definitely not true, but a couple people that I talked to also had the reaction that this could be something that's maybe leaked from Ewers people to, maybe drive up the price and create a bidding war. But however, I mean, Kenton, on the flip side of that, Darian Mensah is allegedly getting $4 million per year from Duke, reportedly $4 million per year on a 2-year, $8 million NIL deal. So maybe it's not completely implausible that somebody would offer $6 million to Ewers for 1 year, who's obviously more proven than Darian Mensah is.
Is he though, Donno? Is he?
Yeah, maybe
because
not.
Having more tape out does not mean that you're more proven. It means you're a more known commodity, but it does not mean more proven. And beyond that, you know what Mensah has that Quinn Ewers does not?
What?
Everybody says that the Big 12 is a, glorified group of 5 conference. Everybody, not everybody, let me not say that. Certain folks from the SEC and Big 10 like to say the ACC and the Big 12 are glorified Power 5 or group of 5 conferences. You know what's interesting though? Quinn Ewers played in that group of 5 conference and still couldn't be the conference player of the year, quarterback of the year,
That's fair.
First team all conference. Mensah was his conferences. He was a guy that was seen highly and regarded highly in his conference. And correct me if I'm wrong here, but he actually has had a year that people looked at and said, oh my God, this kid is it. Not just on paper, not just what people thought, not just, oh man, he could be really good. No. People looked at him, they watched him, and they objectively said, oh, he's one of the best quarterbacks in the nation at his age.
Here's the only point I'll argue with you on is that NIL payments are also based a lot on flash, and Quinn Ewers is so much more known than Darian Mensah. So that I mean, if the $6 million thing is true, like Quinn Ewers will be a flashy signing. Like if somebody lands him and convinces him not to go to the NFL and play another year in college, like that's a guy who, and I agree with you, Darian Mensah might very well be a better quarterback than Quinn Ewers, but who moves the needle more just based on PR and perception? It's Ewers.
Well, sure, but you could go that substance route, but it's like getting fajitas at like one of these fancy restaurants, right? Like you see him come out with all the sizzle and all that good stuff. And then once they're like on the table, you're stuck with the reality of like, oh, this is like 3 fajitas worth of meat. This is like 3 wraps worth of meat. Like, you know what I mean?
And the meat to tortilla ratio is always
crazy. It's always crazy. Like, what are we doing here? So I look at this and I say to myself, if you want flash, sure. But Quinn Ewers being offered $6 million, come on, dog. Come on. Yeah. Quinn, I know what you're doing. Oh, since we're all putting out rumors, Donno, I was rumored to be romantically connected to Megan Thee Stallion.
I started that rumor.
The streets said it. No, it's not me. It's not me. It's what the streets are saying. Okay, I just want everybody to respect me and Miss Pete's privacy during this time. I would just like that very much.
Yeah. So when the X post from On3 came out about this, Quinn Ewers report of the $6 million offer, I was reading the comments. A lot of people were commenting Miami, and there's no question Miami might be interested in landing a flashy quarterback. I would find it very hard to believe that Miami would offer $6 million for him. I'm not really buying it. I could probably say that for most any program, but there's one thing to keep it in the ACC for a second here, Kenton. Mm-hmm. We know when North Carolina hired Bill Belichick, there was the promise of upping their NIL budget for football to $20 million. Right. It was widely reported that it was actually North Carolina, not Oklahoma and not Miami, who offered the biggest NIL bag to John Mateer, the star Washington State quarterback who ended up signing with Oklahoma. His heart seemed to be in Oklahoma. His former coaches are there, all that. But allegedly, North Carolina was the team that offered him more than anybody else did. So I wonder, like, if some, and I don't know if 6 million's the number, but if somebody has made a really, really high bid for Quinn Ewers, it would not surprise me if Belichick and Michael Lombardi are behind that. It makes me wonder that.
So first thing first, let me correct one thing. Mensah was named the freshman all-conference quarterback for Conference USA. He wasn't named first team, so I just want to get that correct before the Ewers fanboys come for me, before Quinn's Queens come out and go crazy on me. Now, moving forward from there, if the North Carolina Brain Trust offered him that, good, do it. Up the score. Go to 8 million. That's the Wolfpacker in me. Now, let me speak as an objective guy who wants the best for the ACC. If you offered Quinn Equanimous Ewers $6 million for 1 year, I promise you there are so many better ways to spend $6 million to still get to 6-6. Okay? Yeah. You can break that up amongst me and Donno. We'll take over for Isaac Shade. We'll be the new Locked On Tigers.
I was going to say, we will become the UNC PR machine. We'll join forces with Isaac. We'll do it. I'll change out all my Miami gear for Tar Heel gear. I'll do it in a second.
Or if you really want to get into it, we'll do it in like how Herbstreit does it for ESPN, where we'll just purport ourselves as the ACC guys and always have like UNC will always be in the A block. We'll spin everything like, oh yeah, UNC is 4-6 right now, but you got to remember 4 of those games were within 28 points. That means they were 4 plays away from being an entirely different team. So there are many better ways to spin that than on Quinn Ewers. But very seriously, if you're talking about what's best for your program, you could spread that money around to all these different positions.
Right.
Why get one Quinn Ewers when you can get the top guys at every other damn position if your goal is, hey, we'll put together a team that is built on a very good NIL system and we'll make this a semi-pro team in essence. Do it like you would in the pros. In the pros, you wouldn't give Pat Mahomes a $100 million a year deal and then have everybody else looking around like, wait, who are we going to pay to block for him? Right. Who are we going to pay to do all the things that he needs done for him? Right. I don't know. But he's getting paid $100 million a year, so we'll figure out the rest with scraps.
Yeah. Well, and the big problem with paying one player that much is the secret's going to get out pretty quick, and the rest of your roster's going to be like, hey, like how come I'm making $30,000 and this guy's making $6 million? Like what's going on here?
He has to be perfect at that point. If one guy's making $6 million. Like, I'm showing up to practice early every day, and I'm getting paid 200 bands. If the guy that is being paid, what would that be? 30 times what I'm making is showing up late ever? Oh, he better put some money in that bucket. He better drop something off. He better be giving NFL-level gifts to all his offensive linemen at that point. But again, because he would be making more than some NFL quarterbacks looking at you, Brock Purdy, by the way. Shout out to you for losing to my Lions. But it's a situation that I can't see happening. But if the Tar Heels want to do it, again, the Wolfpacker in me is like, go for it.
Yeah,
pay him. Up it from 6 to 10.
Yeah,
pay him all the money.
If the $6 million thing is true, I hope it's not Miami. As a guy who covered Miami and went to Miami, I hope that's not coming from Miami because the reports and nobody knows exactly what Miami's paying out because it's a private institution. It's a little bit more tight-lipped, but the reports would indicate that Cam Ward was making about a third of that, and would Quinn Ewers really be worth 3 times what Cam Ward was making? That's a hard no from me. Sorry, that's a hard no.
Absolutely. Man. And if we talk about some of the highest paid quarterbacks and all that good stuff in the NFL, right? Joe Burrow is one of the high. I believe he's the highest with 24.5% of whatever it is that the entire salary cap is. If you look at UNC and you say that they've upped it to 20 mil, I believe was the number that Bill Belichick was asking for, 15 to 20, something like that.
20 allegedly.
Now let's do the math on that, Donno. 6 times 4 is 24. So even if you were to say, hey, we want him to have the exact same amount as Joe Burrow, we'll round it up to 25%. You're still not looking at 6. 6 puts you at, that's more than 1/4 of your total allotment here.
Wow. That's wild. Well, I appreciate the math skills because I couldn't have come to that so quickly. He is Kenton Gibbs from Locked On Wolfpack. I hope everyone has a happy new year. celebrate safely. Don't be an idiot and get behind the wheel if you're going to drink too
Yeah.
much. Find a designated driver, call an Uber, celebrate at home, whatever you got to do.
And don't go shooting in there. Them bullets are coming down. Don't do it. Okay.
What goes up must come down. That's one of the first things we learn at school. So remember that tonight. We appreciate everyone for tuning in. Smash that thumbs up button. Make sure you subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your pods. And we'll talk to you next time on another episode of Locked On ACC, part of the awesome Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.